it's not the point. You know, you're trying to just associate positive emotions with that activity.
Right.
And if we get a little bit more meta, then we can start applying this kind of principle to our daily study. Maybe it doesn't matter if in this particular study session you're taking it a little bit easier, or today you don't do the full study session. Maybe you can view it from the perspective of today what I'm doing is I am allowing myself to do a little bit less work right now. What I'm doing is I'm ensuring long-term consistency, because I'm ensuring that I still have positive emotions associated with the activity of studying and I don't burn out and things like that.
Absolutely. And honestly, I think that graded readers actually offer a lot of bang for your buck because, you know,
Mm.
just the ease of which, the process just takes place, you're not beating yourself over the head looking up this word, this construction, this just all these things thrown into one text at once. It makes it for a pleasurable experience. And I think just that level of comprehensibility allows you to take steps up um, at a quicker rate. And the point that you make is quite nice, that if you just take away all of that, and if it just gives you a habit or an interest in reading, then, well, you know that speaks for itself. And in a way, sometimes, it doesn't always have to be like this, but maybe it's a good idea to take a loss on the front end to basically keep that going throughout time. I think of when I started Russian. um, I basically only studied, let's say, my main study thing habit was 25 minutes of a Massimo book from Monday to Friday. On the weekends, I did some other activities, kind of like cultural activities and things like that, fun things. Although I like the Massimo book, I'm not calling that not fun or anything, but the you know I only basically studied like 25 minutes for months and months and months. And you know I think that really made all the difference because it literally made Russian a part of my life. There was, after that, there was never any question whether if Russian was going to be a part of my life. So all I needed to do was basically invest 25 minutes a day, Monday through Friday, in that book. And the long-term just results of that one little activity, I mean, I consider to be a gold mine.
Yeah, and at the beginning you could have forced yourself to do 3 hours a day, and then you would have got 3 months in, and you're going, "I've had enough." Bang.
Absolutely.
Right. So yeah, maybe you go slow at the beginning to focus more on building the habit, so that over the long term you stick with it.
Absolutely. So you mentioned
Also,
that. Oh,
ah,
continue.
well, I was just gonna add something which is maybe adjacent or maybe even unrelated, but for some reason it came up in my mind, and that is a question of motivation. Um, because we're kind of talking about long-term burnout and things like that. But um, an idea which has come to me with regards to motivation is I think a lot of the time, just trying to think about how to articulate this, and rather than try and generalize it, I think I'll rather just talk about my personal experience. Often I can re-motivate myself just by reminding myself that I am doing something for myself. No one is forcing me. For example, if if I were in your position, I could say no one is forcing me to study Russian. I'm studying Russian out of my kind of, I have complete agency in this. I am the person who is inciting this. I am the person who wants to do this. And then all of a sudden, that kind of childish instinct where, like, your mum comes home and is like, "Have you done the dishes?" And you're like, they're doing the dishes, and you're like, oh, you're enjoying yourself doing the dishes, and your mum
Uh-huh.
comes and is like, "Are you doing the dishes?" All of a sudden, you don't want to do the dishes anymore because
Yeah.
you feel like someone's forcing you to do something. Well,
Absolutely.
if you remind yourself that I'm here doing the dishes because I like language learning, I want to learn this language, I want to be able to speak with other people, whatever your reasons are, I feel like that can make can make a big difference with motivation. I'm not even quite articulating this in the way which I want to, but what I'm trying to say is I'm not saying all issues of motivation can be solved in this way, but I think it's amazing the the impact that that mindset can have on motivation.
The
Because
fact that you want to
sometimes,
do something.
yeah, and it's not so much you wake up in the morning like, oh my god, let's go study Chinese. Ah, it's not like that. It's like you wake up, you might wake up in the morning and you're like, I don't want to study Chinese today, but there's something which is deeper in you, which despite the fact that you're waking up tired and you don't feel like studying Chinese, somehow you still want to study it because you know why you're doing it. You're
Absolutely.
doing it because you want to do it. You know what I mean? So you wake up, you don't feel like it, but you rock up and you do it anyway because it's not like you're going to have necessarily, you're not going to have fun necessarily, but it's satisfying
Right.
to sit at the desk, put in the work. At the end of the work session, you go, yeah, I'm being congruent. I know what I want, and my daily actions are aligning with my goals. So that creates congruence, which makes you feel good about yourself. You get that sense of satisfaction. And then that momentum is what then generates more motivation.
hmm
Anyway, I don't know why. That just popped into my mind as a little sidebar,
Right. So,
or side note there.
it's a nice thing to keep in mind that it's something that you want to do. Um, one thing I think we have to think of is, long-term motivation. And in fact, one of the things that I found in my personal case that helps long-term motivation was just kind of like this pre-interest before studying the language. So, I mean, in the podcast that I did with you, I talked about how I was studying Spanish. I thought that like I was getting so good in Spanish that I could study another language, and I realized that basically that wasn't the case. I needed to improve my Spanish, but that was like a conscious decision of knowing that. But you know, I remember throughout those years just kind of looking or like learning a little bit about how Russian worked, like what people thought of it, or like the problems, the things that made it easy about it. Here and there, I would watch maybe a Russian movie, not so often, but basically like I kept the interest just you know alive there, and I feel that when it came time for me to study, that it was just such a nice pre-motivational factor because I had all this time of me kind of thinking about it, but on a conscious level, knowing that I'm not going to study now because I do enjoy Spanish. I want to get my Spanish to a nice level. So in a way, it was kind of like pre-motivation. Have you had any kind of experience with that before you've even started studying the language?
Uh, I think so. I think what happens is maybe even on a subconscious level this occurs because at the end of the at the end of the day, what happens is you make the decision to learn a specific language. You think about all of the thousands of languages that are available to you in the world.
Right.
Why would you choose a specific one? Well, the reality is you have a whole lifetime of experiences and subtle interactions and observations of the world which inform your decision to study that specific language. For example, you might have had conversations where people have been talking about the growing kind of influence of a certain nation. You go, well, maybe it would be useful to study that language.
Mm-hmm.
Or let's say you've gone and been out for a social event and you bumped into someone who you really liked, who happened to come from a certain place where a different language was spoken, they spoke to you a little bit about their language, and then you have this positive experience and you go, I'm a little bit interested in that, and then there's this little flame and it gets nurtured when you kind of then go and check it out more, maybe watch a film like you've said. Uh, for me personally, um, yes and no. I mean, part of what I try and do is, well, I try and consciously create experiences attached to a language and culture to build up. I think what Luca Lampariello calls a language core.
Mm-hmm.
That's his terminology for it, but I don't know. My terminology might be a little bit different because what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to create lived experiences through the language or attached to the culture where what you're trying to do is you're trying to create more threads of attachment between your everyday self and that language and that culture. So common ways to do that are to create friends who are from who speak that language or from that culture. Try and create activities which are associated with that language or culture. For example, when I wanted to start learning Spanish, I started by going to the Spanish festival in Melbourne,
Hmm.
and I went to a few salsa classes. And then for a long period, I went every for a period of a few months, I went to bachata classes every week. So bachata is a dance style associated with I think it's originally from the Dominican Republic, but now it's a little bit more spread out. Um, and other things like that. And then with Chinese, for example, um, I've been trying to make friends who speak the language, and this is something which I've done with every language I've tried to study. I've tried to create language exchange partners and friends. Chinese specifically. Recently, I met a girl who lives in my only a few kilometers from me, and the way I did that was I went on the app Tandem. I tried the free trial for a week, and during that week, I filtered for location to try and find people near me. Everyone near me who was approximately my age, I sent them a message, and I got one person who replied several weeks later, and it was this girl. And then eventually we ended up catching up. So now we've caught up a few times. Turns out she goes to the same uni as me,
Wow.
and now I have this interaction with someone of Chinese heritage who lives right near me. So all of a sudden, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to create another thread of attachment between Chinese and my daily life, where I've got a
Right.
friend who goes to uni with me, and we can chat in Chinese. Beyond that, I've made friends on Tandem who are from China or from Hong Kong, and I chat with them on WeChat and little. I try and do things like that.
Right. And
Um, yeah, and that makes a big difference over the long term as well, because
big time.
this is the thing: language learning, if you cut through all the bullshit and you're not trying to just reach a superficial level of proficiency in a language, if you want to reach really high levels of proficiency in a language, you got to start thinking in terms of lifetime, years.
Yes.
You got to
Yes.
start thinking in terms of years, right? And in that scenario, it's not so much what's the best study strategy; it's how can I just maintain consistency? Because this is the thing. Nothing will ever beat 10 years of consistent study and interaction with a language. Doesn't matter how effective your study strategy is over a period of a few months or 6 months. Nothing will ever beat that. So if you start playing the long game, everything shifts, and maybe it's not so much about what's the most effective study strategy. It's how can I maintain positive interactions with the language and positive experiences with the language. How can I make the language part of my daily life where it's in, I don't have to even think about maintaining the language. It's naturally maintained because I'm involved in it. This year, just recently, I've joined a Toastmasters club from Quebec. Do you know Toastmasters?
I heard a little bit about it. Why don't you tell me a little more?
Right. So Toastmasters is